I don't know why they would copy that many email addresses. I mean, maybe because they figure it's open records anyways, but to me, somebody hit reply to it.
Thomas?
Yeah, she did reply all, which is
no.
a faux pas.
Luckily, I work for a much smaller bank now. I remember at my old bank, they had 10,000 plus U.S. employees, and people would hit reply all. And then you'd have people responding saying, don't click reply all. And then other people responding, don't click reply all. And it was like,
Oh my gosh. Just think how much electricity each one of those emails used up and how much time.
you ever reply at all?
No. Oh yeah, I've made that mistake before.
I've never done it with a big company.
Not only
Big company.
I don't like to say email, so
Yeah.
mine are very purposeful.
Are you ready? Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Glad you all could join us. We are going to go ahead and get started tonight and try to move as expeditiously as we can through the agenda. We have several things to discuss. Tonight is Monday, December 6th, and the time is 6:38. We'll begin tonight's council meeting with, first of all, with an invocation. But before we do, if you would, please turn your cell phones off as not to interrupt the person's speaking. And we will begin with, an invocation from Council Member Josh Baer, if you would, this time.
Alrighty. I guess let's stand because we usually do. Alrighty, let's pray. Dear Father, thank you for this day. Thank you, Lord, that we can all gather together. Just ask for wisdom in the items that are before us that we need to decide on. Ask, Lord, for there to be robust debate where needed and civility. And thank you, Lord, for the resolution today of an unfortunate incident safely where there was a child involved. And thank you, Lord, for just a terrific Christmas celebration weekend in Norcross. Lots of effort went into the weekend, and you provided some terrific weather, and they had a glorious tree lighting. And just ask, Lord, that we would continue to have a good holiday season where everybody stayed safe. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much for that, Councilmember Baer. We will now move down to item D, which is roll call. Let the record show that all are present and accounted for, including the train. Moving down to item E is presentation of previous minutes for acceptance. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion to approve the November 1st regular council meeting minutes at executive session, the November 8th special call meeting and executive session, and November 15th public works session and executive session. Do we have a second?
Second.
It's been motioned and second to approve. Any objection? Having heard none, all in favor, let it be known by raising your right hand, saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Now we'll move to the portion of the agenda where we will actually set the agenda. And if I could get you to turn your attention to item L. Those agenda items, what we'll do is we'll go down, right down the row here, and any items that we want to add to our consent agenda, we will. And if any of the items here you would like to discuss, we'll certainly do that. So let's start with item number 1, participant transfers, discussion or consent. 2021 CDBG sidewalk trip hazard removal. Consent. Gwinnett County Creative Economy Master Plan.
Consent.
Consent. Number 4.
Discussion, sorry.
Discussion, one discussion. Okay, number 4. Retiree health benefit renewal.
Discussion.
Discussion. Adoption of Juneteenth holiday.
Discussion.
Discussion.
Discussion. Number 6, GDOT lab certification.
Consent.
Consent. Number 7, bridge at Valley and Cochran.
Discussion.
And number 8, City of Norcross Master Arts Cultural Plan request proposals for proposals.
Consent.
Consent.
Consent. And number 9, acceptance of bid for sale of West Peachtree Street property.
Discussion.
Discussion on that one. Okay.
Mayor, I'd like to revisit number 4 and, I'm sorry, not number 4, the number 3, and change that to consent.
Consent? Are we all in agreement?
Yeah.
Okay. All righty. Good. Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Myers.
Mr. Mayor, there's an item that shows up under the county manager report where I'm asking you to add to the table an item that's time sensitive for the Georgia Municipal Association related to our 401A plan and compliance with federal requirements of the IRS.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to add that item from the floor as number 10 for discussion.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to add the reinstatement of the City of Norcross Georgia Municipal Association 401A defined contribution plan document. Do we have a second?
Second.
It's been motioned and second to amend the agenda and add the aforementioned item as number 10. So what will,
Question on that?
let's go ahead and take a vote to add this to the agenda. Okay, all in favor, let it be known by raising your right hand and saying aye.
Aye.
Opposes, same sign. Okay. I'll make sure we follow procedure on that. Okay, we'll add that one. All right, let me just go back through these. Number 1 is consent. Number 2 is consent. 3 is consent. 4, retiree health benefit is discussion. 5, adoption Juneteenth holiday is discussion. 6 is consent. 7 is discussion, bridge at Valley and Cochran. 8 is consent. D is discussion, acceptance of bid for sale of West Peachtree Street. And we have one item that's been added to the table for discussion. And that's the reinstatement of Norcross, Georgia Municipal Association Defined Contribution Plan.
Motion to accept the agenda as presented.
We have a motion on the floor to accept the agenda as presented. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion is seconded by Councilmember Myers to accept. Any objection to moving the question? Having heard none, all in favor, let it be known by raising your right hand, saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, we have an agenda. Thank you. Now, let's move down to ceremonial presentations and recognitions and swearing in ceremonies. We have one proclamation that I'd like to read. It's Pastor Fry. If you would come to the podium, please. There you go. And thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
Had a chance to visit your beautiful church and beautiful edifice. You've done a really great job. It's been a great addition to, re-addition to the city of Norcross. And we felt in your returning to Norcross, we would recognize your efforts and the church's efforts. And we're glad to see you back. And I'll read the proclamation. This is to Norcross Presbyterian Church, whereas the city of Norcross wishes to recognize and celebrate the Norcross Presbyterian Church on the occasion of a return of its original house of worship, built by its congregation more than 120 years ago in 1899. And whereas in 1830, Reverend John Simpson Wilson, pastor of Fairview Presbyterian Church near Lawrenceville, Georgia, along with 20 Fairview church members, started a new church in the Norcross area, which they named Goshen Presbyterian Church. And whereas the first church building was a large wood structure erected at what is now the intersection of Beaver Ruin and Hopkins Mill Road, and whereas shortly after the founding of the city of Norcross in 1870, the Goshen congregation sold this building and property and began holding its services in a community house near the new city, Holy Row, on Sunset Drive. Whereas the Methodist congregation built its own building in 1875, the Goshen congregation began meeting in that place. During this time, the Reverend J.L. King, pastor from 1867 to 1896, 29 years of service, and whereas in 1899, the pastor Reverend James Wood, a new Presbyterian church building was completed and dedicated in downtown Norcross. The Pryor Street building is still standing. Over time, the congregation became known to all as simply the Norcross Presbyterian Church. Whereas after a steady decline in membership, leadership stability was restored with the call of Reverend Matt Fry in 2003, current pastor of 17 years. It's a long time.
Tell me about it.
Over the past 2 decades, the Norcross Presbyterian Church has been active in the community, providing a home to preschool, high school Christian education classes, after-school homework help, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, art scholarships, catering services, youth groups, multi-community theater groups, VBS, barbecues, bazaars, talent shows, crawfish bowls, concerts, choral concerts, poker tournaments, and a job fair, and our annual NPC Pumpkin Patch fundraiser, donating thousands of dollars to local charities. Whereas in 2019 and 2020, the church held its services exclusively online as it found ways to deal with the demands of COVID-19 pandemic, leading the church to begin searching for a smaller building to relocate, which ultimately led them back to the historic building their congregation constructed in 1899. Whereas after extensive renovations, the now 60-member church reopened its doors in downtown Norcross in October 2021 with a renewed passion for contributing to the Norcross and neighboring communities through kind acts of benevolence and community outreach. Now therefore, I, Mayor Craig Newton, and the Norcross City Council extend this expression of our esteem and best wishes to the Reverend Fry and to the members of this congregation on this memorable occasion, welcoming the Norcross Presbyterian Church back to its home, our beloved city of Norcross.
Thank you.
And Pastor Brock, we will,
Thank you.
and we'll give you a chance to say something. Thank you so much.
What an honor this is. Well, I want to thank you, Mr. Mayor, and distinguished council members for this honor. We are so very excited to be back home and looking forward to the wonderful things that we can do together as a community. So we're very excited.
Well, congratulations, and thank you for coming back home.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
A point of history I'd like to bring up, and Pastor Fry could, I'm sure he could fill you in even more, is back during the 60s at the time of integration. Our Presbyterian Church was very, very active, and as you know, the movement did not get wheels, or did not really move until it got in, the church got involved. So thank you on behalf of all of the city of Norcross, back for your contribution even back in the 60s, so thank you so much. Okay, we're going to move down to important announcements and updates regarding COVID-19. Dr. Rona, if you would, and thank you so much for being here.
Of course. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Happy always to be here with you. I've got a presentation I'll use to follow here. As usual, I start with numbers. And worldwide, we're near 266 million cases worldwide. Deaths exceed 5.2 million. In the United States, as of today, we have almost 50 million cases in the United States and over 788,000 deaths. Georgia topped 1.6 million cases and 25,824 deaths, and Gwinnett County's case now exceed 137,000 with 1,432 deaths. But as you know, those are cumulative, and so we like to look at case rates to make sure, you know, we can kind of see where we stand in terms of transmission rates in our communities. So 2 weeks ago, after Delta had plummeted, and we saw really, decreasing cases, we started to see some cases rise. And that alarmed all of us because we don't want to be like the rest of the countries in the world and other states in the United States where they've seen a second wave of Delta. So although we started to increase a little bit over the last 2 weeks, we've really kind of hovered. So I'm happy to tell you that the 14-day published case rate for Georgia is now 137. Last week was 133, so you see we're pretty close. Again, that's still in high transmission rate because we're over 100 cases. Even though the numbers declined after mid-September, we've still not reached under high transmission, under 100 cases per 100,000. For the 14-day published PCR percent positivity, we're at 4.5%. Last week was 3.9%, and I always like to show you the case rates for school-age children 5 to 17, and we're currently at 126 cases per 100,000. Last week, 156, so we're down from there. Again, that's Georgia's. So for Gwinnett County, our 14-day published case rate is 148 cases per 100,000, down from last week, which was 150. 14-day published PCR percent positivity is at 4.6 to be exact. Previous week, 4.1. So we're a little bit up, but that's true across all the metro counties in Georgia too, just up just a hair. Case rates for our school children are at 135 cases per 100,000, previously 147. And I can tell you that's a low case rate for school-age children 5 to 17 when you compare it to other metro counties. So vaccinations, the United States has topped 470 million doses given. 71% of the United States overall population has received at least one dose. 60% have been fully vaccinated. For Georgia, over 12 and almost 12.5 million doses have been given. We're 59% overall population having received at least one dose. And as of 3 p.m. today, we're now 52. It was 51 for a long time. We're now at 52% fully vaccinated overall population, Georgia. For Gwinnett County, over 1.1 million doses given, 60% with at least one dose, and today we reached 55%. We were at 54 for a very long time. So these are just an indicator of, the age range, and you can see that, our adult population, those that we were most worried about when we started this pandemic, are really pretty well covered in vaccinations. And it's interesting because it's the young population that we really need to step up and get vaccinated to stop this pandemic. And truly, if they would just step up in that age room, we could stop. So not only did we save the older population like myself, but we also need the younger generation to really step up and end this pandemic. Similar for Gwinnett County, we're a little bit better. Our numbers are a little higher, vaccination rates for that age group, but nonetheless still lower. For race and ethnicity, you can see 48% of African Americans in Georgia have received at least one dose, and over 50% for Hispanic population. We're a little bit behind that. In Gwinnett County, we're at 46.5 for African American and only 39% for Hispanic. So we've really been trying to work hard on reaching this population. So last time we were here, I believe it was you, Mr. Gaynor, that asked about the vaccinated versus unvaccinated. So you can see that the cases, and this is from April 1st through November 30th. So you can see the red at the very bottom is the line for vaccinated. That's our breakthrough cases. Most of those, over 50% of those, have been the over 65-year-old population. And the tall steep, that was in obviously August when Delta zoomed in. And so that peak is really in the unvaccinated population. If you look at the hospitalizations, this is hospitalizations for any reason. Those people who are hospitalized for any reason who tested positive for COVID, you can see the unvaccinated is hugely high as opposed to the vaccinated, which again is the red line at the bottom, if you can see that. And then these, of course, are deaths. And again, the unvaccinated is the peak and the vaccinated is very low. So, it kind of helps put all the perspective of vaccinated versus unvaccinated in, obviously in perspective so that we can really see the difference here. But our hospitals are doing better. I can tell you they're doing better. They're still overwhelmed, and with flu coming in, hopefully we can keep flu down like we've been managing to do all of last year. We had higher flu in Gwinnett County this year than we had last year. However, I think a lot of our mask wearing and hand washing and social distancing and all that is really helping to keep the flu response down lower as well. So about the Omicron variant, what we know about this, currently there are 16 of the United States that have confirmed cases. Georgia is one of those. Georgia has one case. It was a South African traveler who then came back here and then eventually tested positive here and went to New Jersey and is stable up there. So we're doing our best to really contact trace and try to follow those people that were in contact with him or her. And then we're, so far Gwinnett County hasn't gotten one. We don't know a lot about the Omicron variant. There's a lot of speculation going around. If you listen to WHO versus whatever, in South Africa, in a 3-week period of time, they went from 3% of their cases were Omicron to 30% 3 weeks later. So that's why everyone is concerned about the transmissibility of this variant. The good news is we do, it's very similar to the Alpha variant that we saw earlier on. And there's actually a marker on our PCR test. There's a specific PCR test that gives us a clue that it might be Omicron, so that those cases we can send directly for sequencing. Otherwise, the CDC and across the country have typically sequenced about 5% of PCR tests. You can't sequence a rapid test. So they use the PCR test for that. They're trying to increase the numbers looking for Omicron, but that that specific variant on the PCR test will help us identify Omicron a little sooner, which is good. So we do expect breakthrough cases. We do believe that the booster will be effective, or the vaccine itself will be effective, especially if a booster dose has been received. So because of Omicron, the CDC is really encouraging all people 18 years and older to get the booster if they have been 6 months or more from vaccination of Pfizer or Moderna, or 2 months from Johnson & Johnson's first dose. CDC does believe that people will be, who are vaccinated will have limited severity of illness, which you remember is the major goal of the vaccine in any event. So this is just a list of what we're currently giving. Pfizer's first, second, third, and booster are all the same dose. The pediatric dose is a smaller dose. Under emergency use authorization, Pfizer is for 5 years and older. The first and second dose are fully approved for Pfizer. All the other doses are under emergency use authorization. Moderna's doses are all the same, except the booster dose is a half dose. And then, of course, Johnson & Johnson or Janssen's first dose is the same, but that's 2 months later. And, of course, still Moderna and Johnson & Johnson are still for 18 and older. So we are hosting a vaccine incentive drive this weekend. Every single vaccine that we give on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at 4 locations in the county, and this is not all health department sites. Health department will have the Gwinnett Place Mall location, but $100 for every person that gets the gift or gets the vaccine. Appointments are really encouraged to reserve this. Our health department is already half full for appointments for both Friday, Saturday, or all of Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. You can register at this website, which is finishstrongtogether.com. You do not have to be a Gwinnett County resident to receive the vaccine. You can be any age if you're eligible, but you have to be eligible for it, so 5 years and up for the first and second doses. And of course, for the boosters is only eligible for 18 and up if you meet the time designation for that vaccine. And any vaccine gets a $100 gift card. And the only caveat about the location is that we will not be giving pediatric vaccines at the Gwinnett Place Mall location. So I'm just telling everyone in terms of the holidays and travel and all that, that if everyone at your table is vaccinated, you are good, because you don't have to wear masks indoors, you don't have to social distance, you're really good. But every single person that you add to your table, wherever you are, that is unvaccinated, raises that little risk indicator at the top right. So you can see if one person is not vaccinated, that's one risk, 3 more people add that risk, and then of course the more people unvaccinated raises that higher. So again, we're trying to encourage everyone who is sick, stay home for the holidays. If you're sick, it's just not worth it. There are ample testing available the day before Christmas, the day after Christmas, all of that. So again, if you're sick, stay home, get tested. Anyone who can't find a vaccine or a dose or a test, just let me know. My phone will be on throughout the holiday. And of course, flu, we don't want to spread the flu. We want to pass food, not the flu. So if any have questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ronald.
Sure.
We certainly appreciate you being here. And looks like Councilmember Councilmember Myers and Councilmember Dixon.
Two questions. First question is, what's the rate now that the 5 to 11? What's that rate? Just that small group in terms of overall, not overall population, but eligible. Do we know? You mean
of the what the vaccination percentage is of the eligible population in Gwinnett County?
Right.
It's 56%.
56. Okay.
Right, so because once you added the 5 and up, it really increased the amount of population, so there's not as dramatic of a difference between the ones that are overall population and the eligible.
Okay.
So we're at 56% of that.
And
in Georgia, it's 53%.
Okay, and then the other question is, what is the name of that website again?
It's finishstrongtogether.com for the vaccine incentive event.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
I got two quick questions.
Sure.
They're both kind of related to vaccine versus unvaccinated, but for transmissibility for Omicron or even from the Delta variant, is there a difference? Have we determined the difference between those that have the vaccine versus those that do not have the vaccine in terms of the virus shedding and how easily it transmits? I'm vaccinated. Will I transmit the virus if I become infected as quickly as someone who is unvaccinated but maybe had COVID?
Well, we believe that if you're infected with COVID, that you're obviously, you can infect somebody else for that. I don't know that there's been any studies that show how likely that is, but you're still considered contagious for COVID, obviously. So whether you've been vaccinated or not, if you're infected with COVID, you need to isolate and do all those things. So, maybe in the future we'll have some of that. I don't know the answer to that question right now, but I can tell you that, the severity of illness obviously is much less if you've received the vaccine and then become infected. But we're treating the infection the same regardless if you're vaccinated or not.
Okay, I guess that kind of answers my question. I was looking at that picture thinking, I'm sitting here at the table with 3 vaccinated people and 3 unvaccinated people who have had the virus. I'm trying to figure out where would that put us in terms of, is that moderate, is that low? I don't know. How would you?
Right. I think what you're trying to get at is, it's the unknown risk of who's got the virus if you don't have symptoms, right? And you have to remember that vaccinated people are much, as the graphs will show you, much less likely to become infected. And so that's why, you can't ever plan for the unknown. You just don't know. But again, you can if you're symptomatic, whether it's from the flu or otherwise. If you're symptoms, you get a test regardless of if you're vaccinated or not, and then and they just don't gather if you have symptoms of any kind, for flu reasons too.
Other questions?
Just one. I'm curious about when you're trying to figure out what the percentage of Omicron is with a very low amount of survey rate, where you're not actually sequencing everybody. You've got one, you're only sequencing, what did you say, 5%? Do we multiply that times, what would that be? 50, not 50, 20 to come up with a real number?
Right. Well, I can tell you that between PCR and antigen tests, we do about 23,000 plus in Georgia per day, and so, or more, depending on the day. And, like I said, the CDC and other places are increasing that 5% given the arrival of a new variant. So we should be able to pick that up more. And the good thing about Georgia is that we have testing sites that use that specific PCR test I was referring to that has that gene deletion or that gene, they call it a gene denial. And so all of the specimens who are positive are checked for that gene deletion, and therefore if it's positive, then it goes to the lab to get sequenced.
So if you're testing at all, you're basically you're sequencing it, not maybe a definitive sequence, but you've got a high likelihood of Omicron.
Right, of the positives. So you're taking 5% of the positives and sequencing those, which is going to increase. They're going to do more of those. But in Georgia specifically, we have a specific PCR test that actually gives us a clue that might be Omicron. So we're sequencing every one of those.
Okay.
So we're lucky in this state.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I just had one question to throw out.
Sure.
Isn't it the nature of these viruses to become more transmissible but less deadly?
It's an interesting concept, and I'll have to ask the state epidemiologist, but what the trend of that is, I don't really know. I can get back to you,
Yes.
On what the history has told us about that. But it's not a surprise that that we're seeing variants. We're going to see variants. So this virus is going to find pockets of unvaccinated people to infect and then, mutate. And although there's been a lot of focus on Omicron, I would really encourage the public to pay attention to the second wave of Delta. That's equally a concern in all of our minds as well. And so far, we're faring okay, but that can change at any minute. So, again, those mitigation measures are huge.
Yes. Well, Dr. Rowland, thank you so much for
course.
being here. We appreciate getting firsthand information. So,
Anytime.
thank you so
Thank
much.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move to item H, citizens that desire to address the governing body. If there are any citizens here that would like to speak at this time, please come to the podium, give your name and address.
I'm John Grobenstein. It's 150 Buchanan Street in Norcross. And I was reviewing the minutes. There was a proposed zoning map that concerned me, and I was specifically concerned about the zoning on the corner of Buchanan and North Peachtree. That area is predominantly single-family, relatively historic houses. And it looks that right now there's one apartment complex on North Peachtree, and then the rest are currently single-family occupied. And it concerns me on a number of reasons. Number one, I moved to that particular area as opposed to, say, 7, where they got a lot more house for my money, because I value a traditional neighborhood. And when you zone it for multi-housing, that's a very different feel. And also, I moved to Norcross instead of, say, like Chamblee or the newer part of Brookhaven, because I didn't want the new townhome, multi-story apartment type of community. I wanted a neighborhood feeling. And I think that the little historic area is what really makes Norcross unique and very desirable, even for the people that live in say 7. Like I had a cousin who was visiting her brother who lives in 7, and she came through the historic district and took pictures of all the houses and posted it on Facebook and said what a charming community. So I really hope you'll take a close look at that. And the last thing I'll say, living on Buchanan, of course I knew that that's where the park is, so it's going to be a popular area, but parking is really an issue, and if you put in multi-family housing, it's going to make a already tight situation worse. So I really hope y'all will take a real close look at that. I know there's a historic commission that, which tries very hard to maintain the character, but zoning is a much stronger protection. And because if a developer wants to vary from that zoning, they have to put up notice. But once it's zoned for family housing, a smart developer will quickly demolish and move on, maybe before the impacted people have a chance to speak. So I just hope y'all will take a careful look in that, and I don't know if it's appropriate, but if you have any suggestions of how I could track it or maybe give more input, I would appreciate it.
Thank you so much for your comments, and we certainly appreciate it.
A couple of hands I'd like to give each of you. My name is Jeff Allen. I live at 196 Holcomb Bridge Road, and I'd like to address the mayor and council tonight, and thank you guys very much for making this time available, by the way, council members and Mr. Mayor. I really appreciate it. But what I'd like to talk to you guys today
about is the school zone cameras that we have employed Red Zone to operate within the city. I want to talk about the purpose of the cameras, and I've got a couple handouts here, a lot of pictures, it'll go fast, so don't worry about that, all right? So I've sat up there, I know, you're like, oh my goodness. It's not going to take that long. I want to talk about the effectiveness of the cameras, I want to talk about the confusion that the drivers face as a result of the cameras, and then some of the revenue trends that I've noticed, and just talk to you guys a little bit about that. All right, so on slide 2, the purpose of the cameras, there's a quote here from the Norcross website, and I can just sum it up for you because it's a really long paragraph, but it's pedestrian safety. That's why the cameras were put in, according to the Norcross website. How effective are the cameras at doing that? Well, the way the cameras work is you are not aware that you have been written a ticket if you speed through the school zone. You won't be aware for about 2 weeks. The drivers around you, they're also not aware that you got a ticket or that they got a ticket. So in order for it to be effective, every driver, every speeder in a school zone has to be ticketed individually in order for, and the hard-headed people have to get ticketed more than once in order for them to learn to slow down in the school zones. If you compare that to a blue light approach where an officer pulls someone over in a school zone, you alter the behavior of hundreds of drivers at once by the presence of those blue lights. A lot of you guys were not here when those cameras were voted in. So just to review the history here, we had lots of these cameras around the state. We had red light cameras, we had speed cameras, Norcross had some red light cameras, and slowly all these things started disappearing. And the reason they were disappearing is because citizens were winning lawsuits. There was a town in Ohio that had to pay back $3 million because these were violating the constitutional rights of the citizens. So what Georgia did was they changed the law from being criminal to being civil. When you do that, you take away some of the defenses that the Constitution grants. So you lose your right to due process. And that was one of the main things that those cameras were thrown out on. But are the cameras effective at controlling speed if you make them civil? And if you do, no points are assessed to your driver's license. Your insurance companies are not notified that you got a speeding ticket. You can get a ticket every day and never be penalized any more than monetary. Your license will never be penalized or taken away, or you will be stopped in any regard. Super speeders are not penalized any more than anyone else. Going 1 mile an hour over is the same penalty as going 80 miles an hour over. I'm not sure that that encourages the goal of pedestrian safety. So if you look on slide 4, I've requested a lot of data from Norcross on this, and so all of this comes from you guys. But the crash data for 2020 and 2021 shows that we had 10 injuries, or we had 10 injury crashes. 8 of them were minor and 2 of them were serious. Now, I'm pretty unique in being able to talk to you guys about this because my wife was a pedestrian in Norcross, not in a school zone, that was injured in a car accident. So she was hit as a pedestrian. So I don't take this lightly, like I don't sit here and think you guys should not be writing all these tickets in school zones if pedestrian safety is the goal. I just want to make sure we're meeting the goal. And the police have stated that crashes are down 32% since the cameras were put in. So taking a period, a year before the cameras, comparing it to the year the cameras were put in. However, the year that the cameras were put in was a COVID year, and we were having a lot of virtual schooling, so there was a lot less traffic on the road. So I'm not sure that that particular data point is actually valid. Also, if you look at year-over-year numbers, September to September, tickets were up 468% from September of 2020 to September of 2021. October, tickets were up 44%. Why is there a vast difference? I'm guessing because the cameras were pretty new in September of 2020. So there's a huge difference there. A lot of people got tickets in the beginning, but or they didn't operate for the entire month of September, or something happened that caused this drastic spike, but they're going up. perhaps most alarmingly is I've requested 2 different times, once back in April, I think, and once in December, I asked for pedestrian traffic data. How many pedestrians were injured in school zones? And both times I was told, we don't track that data. We don't have a report that shows that. And if we don't know how many pedestrians were injured in school zones, then why are the cameras even there? We have no idea if we are even meeting success. We don't even know what success looks like. All right, so moving on to confusion for drivers on slide 5. If you'll see the hours that these cameras operate, it is all over the place. I'll just give you one of them, because all of them are different. Take Baldwin. At 8:20, for the first 8 hours of the day, from midnight to 8:20 a.m., you can go 35 miles an hour. Then from 8:35 to 9:35, you go 30 miles an hour. Then from 9:35 to 3:45, you can go 35 miles an hour. Then from 3:45 to 4:45, you go back to 30 miles an hour. And then for 15 minutes, from 4:45 to 5, you have to go 35 miles an hour. That's ridiculous. Every one of these schools has different hours. Every one of these cameras is operating, and you can see it right there in front of you. It's crazy. Nobody knows what the speed should be during those times. Another thing, if you can move over to slide 6, another thing is that the yellow flashing lights, ever since we've had schools with electricity, we've had yellow flashing lights to notify drivers, hey, you need to take more caution. There is school children out crossing the streets right now. These yellow flashing lights are not operating when people are getting tickets. They're getting tickets all day long. Even when the children are safe in the school building, the city is still writing tickets and generating revenue. And there's no kids out there. That doesn't make sense to me. That's not achieving the goal of pedestrian safety because the kids aren't there. All right, moving on to budget. So there's another point I want to make. So when I sat up there in those chairs, I was a big proponent and am a big proponent of the police department. I voted for take-home cars. I voted for upgrading police cars when they needed it because I wanted our police department to be competitive and better than the cities around us so that we can attract the best talent. I'm a big proponent of that. This is not about me not liking the police or anything like that, so I want to make that clear. This is just a math exercise. So if you'll see in this chart, the police budget takes up about 40% of the city's budget. It's by far the largest percentage of any single department. And that makes sense. They have a lot of headcount, they have a lot of employees, they have a lot of equipment, a lot of cars to operate. If you flip over to slide 8, we put that into dollars. It's about $5.3 million of the city's annual budget goes to funding the police, which is great. I have no problems with that. If you flip over to slide 9, you'll see the revenues that were collected from these speed cameras since we put them in is $3.5 million is what we have raised by writing these tickets. We've actually collected more than that from the citizens. We've collected almost $5 million, but we have to send some of it away to the company that made the cameras. So, and then I just visually drew here the year-over-year increase so you can see the stark difference between September and October. I'd give you November, but I've requested that data and I don't have that yet. But you can see one thing you should draw out on here. There's no trend that shows revenue going down. It should if it's working. If the tickets are working, then people are slowing down, but it's just up and down. It's just all over the place. There's no trend that shows that the cameras are slowing down traffic. On slide 10, you'll see this money that we collect, this $3.2 million, it can only be used for police and public safety. That is the requirement of the Georgia state law. So the budget for what the police budget should look like is $3.2 million coming in from ticketed revenue and the remaining portion coming from city taxes. But if you'll flip over to slide 11, that's not what the budget looks like. We've actually allocated just $1 million for fines and forfeitures in the police budget. And $4.3 million is paid for by city taxes. And we have an additional $3.2 million in tickets. And I don't know where that money is going. I think that should probably be incorporated into the police budget, which means that the city taxes don't need to pay as much for the police budget. I'm not advocating that the police budget go down in any sense. I think they're smart people and they know how much money they need. I'm just saying we have this huge source of money coming in, so that should in turn lower the millage rate on the citizens because they don't need to fund the police department out of city taxes because it's funding itself by a large part. So, in summary, I'm not sure that we're making schools safer. I think we're collecting revenue. And I think it's pretty obvious based on everything I've presented to you that we're making money. We're not really changing the behavior of the drivers or making schools safer. Traffic's not slowing down. One thing I always tell my team at work is don't come to me with just problems. I want to hear your problems, but come to me with solutions. And my solution that I'm coming to you with is do the blue lights approach. Get officers out there, pull people over for speeding in school zones, and you'll solve the problem of driver behavior a lot faster. Your revenue is going to go down, but clearly we operated fine without these cameras before. So I just think you guys should take a look at this. I don't know what your contract states. I don't know when you guys can get out of this. I think it's something you should investigate. But I just feel like it's not a good look. And there's a lot of unanswered questions, and the safety certainly doesn't seem to be getting better based on the data that the city gave me. So, thank you guys.
Very good, Jeff. Thank you so much for that presentation and
Jeff?
the information that you...
Jeff, your bag.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
I probably should take my bag home with me.
The information that you've shared, we'll certainly take that under consideration.
Okay, thank you. And I'm happy to answer any questions now, or you guys all have my information. But thank you all very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Arlene, thank you for letting me know I was leaving my computer.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other discussion from citizens at this time? If not, we will move to council discussion. Council, did you have anything you'd like to share at this time? Having heard none, we'll move to city manager discussion.
Thank you, Mayor.
Very quickly, I just want to go through a few things that relate to tonight. One is that when we started down the path of looking at delinquent taxes, you had asked us to come back before we got to the end of that process to give the opportunity to decide whether we should go forward with the tax sales. And they're scheduled for tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. As I shared with each of you last, I think Friday, we're down to 2 outstanding residential properties. At this point, my suggestion is that we cancel the sale tomorrow. I've looked at the properties. I would propose that over the next few months, we try to go through a kinder process to get those 2 property owners to the finish line. One of them participated in the tax sale process 3 years ago. It's an elderly resident who's a long-term resident of the city and obviously made it through the process 3 years ago and is still in the same property. So I would just suggest that it's $1,600. That is the total impact of those 2 properties, and that includes all of the fees, which they would still be responsible for. And if we're not able to successfully get them to pay those fees to us, then when we do the next tax sale process, they'll show up again and we can go to the end. But I think we've been very successful. I would commend Alicia Daniel for being the person that manages that process and works with them. But unless there's any concern by any of you, that would be my intent to cancel the sale tomorrow morning.
I appreciate the hard work, the list that was presented to us before.
It's been a scary place, but it's come down dramatically, and I've been able to search and get phone numbers for the 2 individuals. So as I said, I propose we use a kinder approach, and if we can't get them to what I consider the finish line, then that will still be due when we go through this process the next time. A second item, just to point out, I want to take responsibility, the 401A item that you added to the agenda. I was confused. I thought that GMA was asking us only about our pension plan, but they actually sent us 2 sets of documents. It's not a reinstatement, it's technically a restatement because GMA can't be in the process of offering us the 401A defined contribution plan without being in compliance with IRS guidelines. Those have changed. And so I apologize for bringing on short notice, but I think they'd like that done before the end of the calendar year. And we have really no opportunity to make any changes. So that's where we're at. The only thing we could do would be to correct any errors that have been in place since 2017 when this plan was put in place. So we added it I'll commend Monique for finding a creative way to describe this on her agenda. A copy of the material has been on my desk, and no one has inquired about taking a look at it. I can understand why I wouldn't want to read it myself. It's about 70 pages of material. He had asked us to look at the holiday calendar, and when we get to that item, we have a little checklist that lets you compare the federal holidays against our existing proposed holiday, so we can share that. That might be an easy tool when we get to that discussion. We are going to come back on Cochran and Valley and the connection. We received information literally today, and our engineer's here, and when we get to that item, be able to talk to you about where our engineering firm has started down the path of giving us a proposal that will resolve that issue of how to connect those two roads. And then lastly, we've added an option for tonight's discussion of a retiree health plan for those 65 and over, and we have with us tonight Karen Larkin from BKS Partners, which is the consulting firm that works with us on that, and so we'll be able to help you as you get to that discussion. And with that, that's what I wanted to bring to your attention tonight.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that information. Any questions?
Mr. Mayor, Eric, you said that the tax sale is supposed to happen tomorrow. Mr. Mayor, could I make a motion to add item number 11 for the council to address the tax sale, please?
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to amend the agenda, and a second to amend the agenda. To add the tax sale, to amend the date for the tax sale. To address whether or not we're going to have the tax sale. Right. Now, I believe, and I could be wrong, this is why I have to defer to council. I believe this can be done under administrative purview without an agenda item. So there would be no need to add it.
Okay.
You want to withdraw your motion?
Sure.
Well, the secondary motion has been withdrawn. Thank you. Okay, then let's move to public hearings. That's text 2021-005 update to the official zoning map for the city of Norcross.
Good evening. I want to thank the city manager for doing the discussion on these for me a few weeks ago while I was out with my family. So thank you, Mr. Johnson, for that. This is just the annual adoption of our zoning map. It's a graphic representation of all the changes that we've made to this map in this year. We've addressed the one question from Mr. Pat Ite from a few weeks ago as to why 7 looked like it had a bunch of M1 in the middle of it. Our parcel lines are gray, so when you zoom into it, the gray lines go away, and 7's not zoned M1. It's all PRD like it's supposed to be. And then we were off by a few feet on our historic district, so we withdrew that, or drew that again, and got it corrected by a few feet over in the 7 area. And then going to the gentleman's comments from tonight about that PRD that you see sort of in the middle. And I had a conversation back in the spring with council members Myers and Hickson about that nebulous little green blob that was there. And back in the day, before we went to the Unified Development Ordinance and changed the nomenclature on our zoning districts, we had a very nebulous RM, which was our multifamily district, sitting sort of in the middle of downtown. And when we got rid of that district and renamed it, what's now known as most of our multifamily is PRD, but the PRD actually has a catch-all for multiple types of housing units and includes single-family detached, but with that RM in the middle. Our densities are controlled by our future land, our comprehensive plan, so density changes probably won't even be seen in this particular area, but when we did the PRD, every existing house or every existing apartment complex was zoned to its current plan.
So if anybody ever tried to change anything down there, it wouldn't be purely administrative. All PRDs have to come back before mayor and council. So that's a pretty ardent and strenuous process, but it's not meant for any multifamily to be in the downtown area along North Peachtree or Buchanan or anything like that. It was just tying that RM to its existing use as a single-family residence in most of these cases.
Thank you so much for that presentation. We'll begin by asking if there is anyone from the audience that would like to make a comment or a question relative to the presentation.
I would just like to ask you, how would a citizen follow up if they had a concern or legal matter?
Yeah, you can come to my office every day, Monday through Friday, from 8 to 5. Right, second floor in community development, so you're definitely welcome to come by and we can talk you through the process.
Okay, we'll move to council discussion. Council, do you have any questions?
Yes, Mayor, I do.
Councilmember Gaynor. Councilmember Myers, I don't know why.
We get confused all the time. We get all confused all the time. You gotta go to work tomorrow.
Councilmember Myers, there you go.
Tracy, thank you so much for presenting today. I zoomed in a little bit in this particular area and on the Buchanan Street, North Peachtree. There are two homes there that are single-family resident homes that it looks like it crosses over, and there's two currently multifamily homes that are there that's obviously PRD. Was that also the intent to have those two parcels PRD? Would be my first question.
It was the intent because we knew that there had probably been some interior modifications that we possibly could not have permitted back in the day, or that, might try to further subdivide them into some sort of apartment. So we just went ahead and said, well, this is a little peculiar, zoning here, the RM in the middle, and so we changed it to the PRD nomenclature so that we could have that sort of look and ability to look at that should someone try to say, well, it's a triplex or it's a duplex. Well, no, it's always really been a single-family home, and there were some interior modifications made that maybe we weren't privy to. So we retained that a little bit more control over going back and seeing that should somebody attempt to redevelop it in the future.
Yeah, and both those homes are historic homes as well, which comes with a second layer
Of scrutiny.
of scrutiny. And then I just want to make a clarification point for our audience. Our PRD zones not only go through mayor and council for approval for modifications, they also go through our planning and zoning board and our architectural review board. So there's like 3 layers to that for our community, just so everyone is aware when they see that green PRD, that's our most stringent area, which is different than maybe some other neighborhoods and communities where you would normally see pockets of, oh, we can build anything here. Those actually, we put that intentionally in there. So I just wanted to clarify that for the audience. Thank you.
Any other questions, council?
Yeah, actually, I don't want to belabor this point on that, but I've got kid brain and COVID brain, and just, I forget when we did stuff over the past 24 months. We're not rezoning these parcels with this map. Haven't we already addressed these parcels on this map before?
Right. Most of it is the existing zoning map.
That's what
The
I
only
thought.
thing you're seeing changing, this is what we call our working map today, which will
Yeah.
become the official zoning map tomorrow. It just reflects the changes, most of it's standard. I mean, you're just adding in the changes that you've made for this year.
That's what I assumed. I thought we had dealt with these when we first adopted this map.
Right, all but 3 parcels.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Have you heard?
Not that I have COVID, sorry. I should probably clarify that.
Any,
Matt, you know, unless it rains.
since we don't have any other questions, council, do we have a motion?
So this map, excuse me a second,
So we do have
this
questions.
particular map still shows M1 in 7.
No.
No, you zoom in, it's such a large map, it's 24 by 36, but when you zoom in,
Okay, the copy that we have here clearly shows it labeled M1.
It's M1 across the street.
Let me, let's zoom in to 7 right there on the, Hopewell is in, well, part of Hopewell is in 1.
Yeah, so what you see on the map, Councilmember Gaynor, is there's a church and there's a cemetery across. And so you get, that's M1 on the corner of Autry.
Right. That's the church.
Yeah, that's the church's
So that
property.
doesn't change?
No, that doesn't.
That stays M1?
That stays M1.
Okay.
Yeah, West Peachtree is the border of 7, Autry is the border of 7, Thrasher is the border of 7, and it goes up to NX, which NX is,
That's the Broadstone,
It's Broadstone.
neighborhood mixed use.
Yeah, you can kind of see it up here.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I got it.
It gets busy with the labels.
yeah.
especially in that area. Not so bad in character area up 4.
Okay.
No questions.
So, good. Okay, well, are we ready to move?
Mayor,
Chair will entertain a motion.
Do we, this is a hearing, does it have to be read multiple times, or do we vote, are we voting on this?
We're voting on it.
Gotcha, thank you. So I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda item, the hearing, the public hearing for the zoning map improvements.
So we have a motion on the floor by Councilmember Myers. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Gaynor. Any objection to moving the question? All in favor, let it be known by raising your right hand saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Motion passes. Okay. Let's move to public hearing 2021-04 Deconstruction Ordinance, if you would, Tracy.
Yes, this is something we worked on at the behest of Councilmember Bayer. We did a lot of research, involved the Historic Preservation Commission, Sustainable Norcross Commission, along with staff in developing this particular ordinance. And basically, deconstruction is the systematic dismantling of a structure or portion thereof to maximize its salvage of materials for reuse. In this particular ordinance, deconstruction should apply to residential or primary residential structures constructed prior to 1950. Most residential structures constructed after 1950 were constructed mainly with composite materials that are difficult to break down, recycle, or even reuse with great success. In addition to taking under consideration the deconstruction and recycling and reuse, Mayor and Council also asked us to consider outlining that any primary residential structure be approved for demolition or deconstruction, that it must be built back to its original exterior style and form based on information available from both the city and county records. And we did ascertain through help from the Historic Preservation Commission that a handful of metro area businesses that specialize in LEED level deconstruction practices and large level recycling and repurposing of construction materials. They are Southern Demolition and Environmental, Vintage Bricks, and MG Recycle. So based on that information that we presented to you, Community Development Department recommends approval of this code change for deconstruction and recycling and reuse.
Thank you for that. Do we have anyone from the audience that would like to ask a question at this time? Then we'll move to council for council discussion. Any questions from council?
Just for my clarification, in simplistic terms, any home built after 1950 would either have to be deconstructed and then have to be built. Did I hear that correctly? Built at the way, in the manner in which it was before?
The ones that built prior to 1950 would be required to be deconstructed, but otherwise, when any home comes down in the historic district, you'd want to build it back to form based on our information. So we'd still be able to, if something was demolished or taken down in the historic district, then it would be required to be built back to its period form. So if it's a Georgian house, you'd want a Georgian house to be put back in.
Is there a, you finished, Matt, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there an appeal process on that? I think back to the house on Barton Street. It was before your time, but Mr. Reinhardt's house, it had a little 1940s, what do you call them, just a little little house, a
military
cottage.
Type thing.
Pardon me?
Wasn't it maybe a
Military.
repurposed military?
Oh, no, it was some sort of cottage, but what kind of process would be in place for an appeal where, and I don't know how to protect the city in that aspect, but let's say that someone had a historic home, because the historic district's pretty large, on a large lot, and they wanted to, they'd have to rebuild it, that little cottage, or would they have, how would that look?
It's not necessarily that, say, if they had a 700 square foot Georgian cottage, that you would say only a 700 square foot Georgian cottage is going to go back there, but it would have to have the look and feel of the Georgian era in time.
And that would be handled through the ARB or
Through the ARB or through the
Okay.
HPC.
Is there still an appeal process to council in such manner?
If anybody feels they're aggrieved by an approval of the ARB,
Okay.
their grievance goes to the mayor and council.
Okay, so there's some.
So there's a way to challenge
Yeah,
that
okay.
outcome.
Any other questions? Council, would this also include any attachment or auxiliary homes?
No, this only applies to the primary structure. So say if you have a detached garage or a little shed out back, it's not going to necessarily apply to those secondary structures, but it's going to apply to the primary structure.
Okay, I want to clear that up in case it came up as an issue. Okay, council, do we have a motion at this time?
I have one more question.
You have another question?
Sorry. I'm trying to wrap my head around this. So if I have a historic home that was built in 1940, for example, but it's been sitting, there's a tree growing through the middle of it, or there's infestation of some animals or whatnot, I've got to deconstruct that and rebuild it, and it's in the historic area. I've got to rebuild it in that period of time, and this policy articulates that.
Right, they would have to rebuild it, but if there's something that is just, prohibiting them from successfully deconstructing it, there is also an appeals process for that. That's a staff level appeals. If it's just not feasible to do it, if there's a chance that the house is just going to fall or somebody might get hurt in the deconstruction process, then there is appeal to avoid the deconstruction and go straight to demolition. But there have to be pretty extenuating circumstances validated by the chief building official.
Yeah, so my overall, for the public record, my concern here is that as our community continues to grow, not all homes are in historic homes, not all old homes are historic homes. And there's a possibility that we can prohibit growth of certain families coming into our community because we made it extremely challenging for them to repair a home that may be derelict or blighted today because we're not in the position to rehab that home. So I from that reason, I'm very cautious about making bold stances that you have to deconstruct it the way in the manner in which we wrote it, because that's very expensive for someone to do that. That's rehabbing a home that's going to beautify our community. It's just different than protecting a home that's already beautiful and someone wants to destroy it to put something modern there. Two different scenarios I think we're trying to address here.
I have a question.
Mr. Mayor?
To
Councilmember
piggyback off of Councilmember Myers, do we have a list of exceptions that we can check off to say, okay, if it's infested, this one must be fully demolished, as opposed to if a tree comes through it? Do we have?
We would rely on the interpretation of the chief building official as to what
So there is
state that it's
something.
in. And if it's something that it would be too dangerous to be deconstructed, we just go straight to demolition.
Okay, all right.
Councilmember Bear.
I think to talk to Councilmember Myers' concern, right, historically, what we've seen occasionally happen in Norcross is that property owners neglect their home knowing that, possibly knowing that it's very easy just to bulldoze it down. And so part of the will behind this is that when the city says that the historic architecture in our town is part of our brand and part of what makes this place special, then and that we value it so much as to put these kind of requirements on it, then what possibly will happen is that instead of folks doing demolition by neglect, they will either invest the money to keep that property in good stand, or they will sell it at a discount because they can't get more money for it, because we have requirements that you're not allowed to get away with demolition by neglect. So, demolition by neglect is a real thing that's affected Norcross over the years, and it's really, it really is, it doesn't go along with our green initiatives that Sustainable has worked on so long. It's wasteful. There's all different kinds of reasons why it's not the right way to go. And in terms of, I think what this is going to do is actually it's going to help families to come to Norcross, because families that maybe present a certain amount of ability to fix up a house themselves will be able to buy that property at the discount that it should be sold at, because Norcross has put a stake in the ground and said, we value historic architecture in our town, and we're not going to let folks neglect the maintenance of their homes. I don't know if that helps or not.
No, I think I definitely support our historic character and preserving that historic character. I guess I'm more concerned necessarily not with the future of this process, but of in-flight development and developers who have projects that they've purchased already that now have a new cost that we're associating with them. These aren't properties that are demolition by neglect over the next 10 years. We're talking, they've already bought this neglected or blighted home, and they want to rehab it today, and this may preclude them from doing so at a reasonable cost. They've already paid for it at a higher cost because this wasn't in play. So I'm concerned about that. But as we go forward in the future, I think there's some legitimate, how do you protect your historic character in your community? I think that's an important piece. But we've got a mixed bag here, so drawing a line in the sand, someone's going to lose, and I'm very cautious of that piece right now.
Well, the good thing is about that, Matt, is that they can appeal to us directly.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So if someone doesn't like it, I mean, I'd hate to be onerous in that and add an extra level of burden, but if something is in process, they can appeal to us for an up or down, and at least that would maybe get us through the short term.
That's true, and that 1950 cutoff, I think that's protective of some of the projects that you're probably thinking of in the back of your mind, is when you're looking at the dates on some of those houses that we know of. They were built in 1950, so that they don't, meet the criteria for, the systematic deconstruction. They would be just, straight to being taken down. So right now, I think we only have, one house that we're really, really and truly concerned about, and they actually have a remodeling group who's looking at saving that particular house.
Thank you.
Any other questions of council at this time? Okay. My only question, is the map clearly defined for
historic
For
purposes?
historic.
Yes, absolutely. We triple checked it, thanks to that question a few weeks ago.
Very good. Okay, at this time, we'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve an amendment to the Code of Ordinances of Norcross by revising Chapter 300, Article 7, Section 307-6, entitled Demolition and Deconstruction of Structures, and Section 307-6.1, entitled Deconstruction Requirements, with the following enacting clause as listed.
We have a motion on the floor by Councilmember Baer. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Gaynor. Any objection to moving the question? Having heard none, all in favor, let it be known by raising your right hand saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Motion passes. Okay, we will move expeditiously through the reports. Mayor, if any of the council members have anything to report at this time?
Yes, sir.
Very good. Then we'll move expeditiously through the announcements, only to place a highlight on a couple. The Sparkle Celebration carriage rides is still going on. And Coffee with Council is coming up Saturday, December 18th at 8 a.m.
Mr. Mayor, that'll be at Dulce Sueños on Beaufort Highway instead of 45 South Cafe.
Okay, can you repeat that?
Everywhere?
Dulce Sueños on Beaufort Highway. It's a little bakery.
Good. All right, and a couple of quick notes. City Hall is closed Thursday, December 23rd, and Friday, the 24th, in observance of the Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. And City Hall is also closed December 31st in observance of New Year's Day. Okay. Let's move down to item K, which is board appointments. And looks like we have one appointment to discuss tonight. And this is to the Historic Preservation Commission. Council, we've discussed this in exec and it's presented tonight for a vote up or down. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the reappointment of the following board members in terms as presented. Ashley Holmes Lyons, term to expire December 1st, 2024. J.P. Mayer, term to expire December 1st, 2024. And Pam Hopper, term to expire December 1st, 2024.
We have a motion on the floor by Councilmember Bear. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Beckles. Any objection to moving the question? Having heard none, all in favor, let it be known by raise your right hand saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. Okay, let's move down to item L, which is approval of the consent agenda. And we've gone through, and I can reiterate those items that we've discussed. Item 1 is consent, 2 is consent, 3 is consent, 4 is discussion, 5 is discussion, 6 is consent, 7 is discussion, 8 is consent, 9 is discussion with an agenda item 10 being added. Council?
Good. I agree.
Okay. All right, well then let's, we would need a new motion. Okay.
Motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
There's been motion second to approve the consent agenda as presented. Do we have any objections or questions? All in favor, let it be known by raising your right hand saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. All right, let's move on. Item 5. 4. I'm sorry? 4. Oh, okay. It's been a long day for me. I drove an hour and a half from Greensboro. I'm at a ECG meeting in Greensboro from yesterday and today, and I got to head back tonight. It's an hour and a half drive to finish the meeting tomorrow. So I'm a little bit, just counted to my head, not my heart. I'm a little bit tired. Okay, item 5. 4. There we go. Okay, retiree health benefits.
Under the mayor, council members, we presented this to you 3 weeks ago, and since then, last week I provided an updated agenda item and added a 4th option. The options that you had before you at your last meeting reflected option 1, which was a change to Humana as the drug provider, no change for the medical plan. Option 2, which was recommended 3 weeks ago, was to keep the benefits the same, but increase employee and spouse contributions by $25 per month and phase that in over the next several years. Option 3 was to keep the current benefits in place and basically do nothing to what we have in place today. What I provided you was an option 4, which is similar to option 2, but it would basically not require existing employees or spouses who participate in our 65-plus medical plan to make a contribution at this time, but effective January 1, we would require new retirees to contribute $25 per month, and to be a little bit more clear in terms of the phasing, to set an objective of how much over time should a retiree or a retiree spouse contribute. Obviously, there are iterations of that if you wanted to change that, but what I suggested was a objective of over time getting to where, excuse me, a retiree would pay 25% of what's currently a $480 a month benefit, so they pay 25% of the cost, and that a covered spouse would pay 50% of that monthly cost, which is currently $480 a month. So basically came back with a fourth option, and we have with us tonight Karen Larkin, who you, I think, met by video in May when we had our retreat where we talked about retiree health.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. It's good to be here tonight. As Mr. Johnson said, I'm Karen Larkin with VKS Partners, and I'm here to review the option 4 with you and answer any questions that you have and help you finalize your decision. I do have, if you'd like me to pass out the different options, or would you like me just to, I know that Dan Nackers went over those options last time, but I could pass out this one page if that would help everybody.
Sure. Yeah, you certainly could pass the information out.
Yeah. I'm not sure how many copies. More. And you want me to just go over the option 4?
Well, I guess...
Or you'd like me to go through them all one more time, just overview?
Why don't we just see if there's questions, because we've already seen this.
Yeah,
Right?
they've had it presented, so I think at this point, if you have questions, we'd be glad to answer those.
So option 4 basically keeps what we've already told employees that have retired, except for maybe if we did option 1 and option 4. Option 4 would kind of not increase anything unless you retire January 1st, right?
Well, so option 4, which is the new option, only applies to anyone who retires on or after January 1 of 2022.
The previous employees, 38 employees, or how many is
There's
it?
28 employees or spouses who are in the 65-plus plan.
How many, sir?
28.
Is there, maybe at a later date we should address this, but I'm not seeing this, I'm seeing this as a move forward, and we're not impacting any of the current 28?
Correct. Option 4 doesn't close that door, but at this point, it's probably the most conservative option because it's forward-looking. It only affects future retirees. It doesn't have any impact on current retirees.
Okay, I'm okay with that for now, but I'd like for us to do an employee survey or retiree survey and find out a little bit about what the, what the future might look like if we were to adjust the spousal benefits, and see what that may look like in terms of cutting down some of the cost. Does that make sense?
So certainly we can survey whatever you want. There is a point at which, and Karen, I mean, there's a point at which recent hires will not have eligibility for spouse. That option will phase out, but we have an individual who's going to be retiring January 1 who hasn't been working for the city for some time, but has just announced his intent to retire. So that means he met the age requirement now. So we do have spouses, we will have additional spouses that will be eligible. There will be a point in time when enough time will have passed that we will not have any more spouses come into our 65-plus plan.
I just see this as a way of starting to chip away at our future liabilities, and it allows us to kind of use a scalpel for now, but it doesn't close the door on us using a little bit more aggressive means if we so need to, right?
Correct, and just to inform Mayor and Council, is the end of 2017, there was an amendment to the retiree plan because the retiree benefit plan was a page with 2 paragraphs. So we worked with the prior city mayor and staff and amended and added a class 3, so which are for employees that were hired on or after January 1, 2018. That spouse and children coverage would no longer be eligible. But that's for retirees that were hired on or after 2018. So that's way down the road.
So on 2000, we just put a stake in the ground then, and we're just moving, kind of moving through the motions.
And your retiree benefit plan does have a disclaimer that you have the right to make changes, at any time. So just wanted you to know that it's in there.
I have a question, Mr. Mayor. Can you walk us through option one? Sure. As I look at changing, this looks to me like changing carrier.
Changing the prescription drug carrier from Express
Just the
Scripts
prescription drugs.
to
yeah.
Humana.
Oh, from Express Scripts to Humana.
Correct.
Okay, so it's a fairly common thing that I've been through many times in my career where an employer decides for whatever reason that the carrier that they're using for insurance policies changes because
Correct.
the economics don't make sense anymore
Correct.
for that particular carrier. I think what are the savings that we would have by adopting option one?
As it states here, the annual decrease to the city would be $25,855.
Yeah. Okay,
If you chose to go to Humana. I think the concern was for the current retirees, there may not, there most likely will not be a disruption because the prescriptions that are under Humana are all available. They're all Medicare approved prescriptions. But there is always a chance, anytime you change carriers or prescription drug companies, there could be some disruption. And there's not a way to really know until a prescription is presented and they have to choose another therapeutic class prescription.
Right. But changing carriers is always...
It's common, yes.
It's both common and also carries a certain amount of change to the way an employee would deal with the insurance company, or the specific coverages might be minorly affected.
Correct.
It seems to me that being good stewards of the city's money, this seems like a pretty hefty amount of savings for low-risk change. And I would advocate, if I might, that we might consider adopting both option one and option four as a combination.
Understand?
Any additional questions? What was, Eric, earlier I heard your recommendation. What was your recommendation?
So when we brought this originally to you, we recommended option two. In what I presented to you in the current packet, what I sent to you each individually last week, basically had two recommendations. Wasn't backing off of recommendation two, but giving you the alternative recommendation of four. Four has no current disruption for retirees, but starts to phase in the higher fees. Option two phases in fees, but would include existing retirees.
Any other questions or discussion from council? Okay, at this point, Chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move that we adopt options 1 and 4 as we proceed further on for retirement health care for the city.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to adopt 1 and 4 as the options for the retirement health benefit renewal. Do we have a second?
Second.
It's been motioned and seconded by Councilmember Beckles to adopt 1 and 4. Any objection to moving that question?
Make one clarification before you vote. In the backup that you received for tonight, we indicated that Humana requires a 60-day minimum to implement, and it had suggested that it would be effective February 1st, I think.
March 1st.
At this point, we have to do March 1st. I just want to make that clarification, so if anyone checks back, that it's clear that
Which is what gives us time to communicate.
and that gives us a little bit more time to communicate to existing retirees, which I think is important since option 1 does have an impact to them, and obviously option 4 has an impact to all future retirees. Thank you.
I appreciate you doing that, as most retirees are on a fixed budget. So thank you so much. Any additional questions? Having heard none, all in favor of the motion for options 1 and 4, please let it be known by raising your right hand and saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, is same sign. Motion passes. Okay, let's move to item...
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen. Let's move to item D, adoption of Juneteenth holiday. Camille Washington, would you come up?
Okay, yes.
Go right ahead.
Okay, last meeting, you asked for a comparison of our current holidays as opposed to the federal holidays, and that's what you have in front of you there. Do you have any questions?
Thank you for this.
Okay,
This is as proposed, yes.
right.
The reason I brought this, I asked for discussion on it, Mr. Mayor, is just to kind of go back to the opportunity for us to address this. As we add Juneteenth as a holiday, which I think we should, we might want to kind of try to standardize our holidays or, try to align our holidays with what the federal government does. This will allow us to just kind of match it with where a lot of other employees do. Whether or not we remove a day is up to this council. As it is now, the employees get 12 days. There's 10 federal holidays. As proposed, the employees would get 13 days for the 11 federal holidays. I would like to discuss us removing Good Friday, which is painful for me to say. I just have some worries about not addressing or having religious holidays that are not celebrated at a federal level. So I think that I'd love to hear some discussion along that, just to see where we can land on something.
I have a question. How long have we had Good Friday as a holiday?
We added it maybe 4 years ago.
Yes, about 4.
We didn't have debate on it. We added it as part of an update to our employee handbook, so we just kind of slipped it in.
I would support your proposal, Councilman Brixton.
Just as a clarification, it's the only overtly religious holiday that has no civic analog to it. And I would agree with you, Councilmember Hickson, that having one overtly religious holiday opens up the possibility that other overtly religious holidays would be required. And so it seems to not make sense from a governmental perspective.
Yeah. I have discipleship at 7:30 in the morning, so I'll ask for forgiveness, but I agree. The other question would be, and I'd love to just kind of feel out where council sits on this. In doing this, we are adding an additional day for our employees to have as a holiday. So we're going from 12 to 13 holidays. There was suggestion in our last council, at our policy work session, that we keep it at 12 and switch in Juneteenth for Good Friday, or should we keep it at 13, add an additional, switch in Juneteenth for Good Friday, and then add an additional personal holiday, which would keep it at 13 days as opposed to the 11, so the employees would be gaining a day instead of remaining the same. Did I sufficiently mess that up?
Yes, you did, but I'm good with the employees getting 13 days.
Yeah, I don't have a preference on 13 days versus 11 days, and to make those days up as floater days. But I would like to propose that we follow the federal holiday schedule, and any dates that are different than those dates be loaded as floaters. I'm not opposed to discussing that further, especially for a day after Thanksgiving and Christmas Eve, which are not federal holidays. But from my perspective, federal holidays and then allowing the other days to be floater days, I think
achieves the same thing.
Achieves a very similar thing. However, that might change with the city manager's opinion as well in terms of having a staff Christmas Eve. So, but I think if we keep it within the federal holiday schedule, as new holidays or different holidays change in the federal standpoint, we're not having to revisit this conversation over and over again. We've addressed it. We just add those dates when the federal holiday adds. So that would be what I would be a fan of, but I'd also like to understand what the implications would be for through city manager and you, Camille.
Yeah, it will be. So are you saying just switch from our current schedule to the federal, 11 days? Is that
Yeah, it'd be, as a starter there, would be the federal holidays plus 2 floaters. Instead of today, we are proposing 1, it would be an additional floater. But
it was still 13.
it's still 13. The total days are the same.
So
It's
plus
just
the one personal holiday?
Yeah, and that takes out Good Friday and 2 other, but it keeps it 13.
So just as a comment on that, if Thanksgiving, the day after Thanksgiving and Christmas Eve go from city shutdown holidays to holidays that would be floaters is essentially the way you might look at it. We've incurred a fair amount of cost to keep the buildings open, the security. You can't just have one person be at City Hall. Oh, I decided I'm going to work on the day after Thanksgiving, so the City Hall has to be open and all the costs incurred for that. It seems to me that those are pretty well-established holidays. The 4-day period over Thanksgiving and the 2-day holiday at Christmas. And it seems like that is worth preserving because it actually would be less expensive. It seems to me it'd be less expensive for us to identify a day when the City Hall is shut down, there's nothing available, than to have City Hall open and potentially costs associated with that.
I see where you're coming from, and that could be any given day. If everyone decided to use their holiday tomorrow.
Well, it could, but we identify certain holidays and City Hall's closed on those days, and what you're saying is that, a large part of the population likes taking the day after Thanksgiving off, so now City Hall is going to have
just like that time and a half pay.
Well, the City Hall's not open that day, so there is no time and a half.
I know what Matt said, it would be open.
It would be.
And then they could get time and a half pay if they so chose.
No, because it's not a holiday. It's straight time that day.
Oh, that'd still be,
No, it's not a holiday. You've decided it's not a holiday.
Yeah, that's right. I still think there's benefit to, what happens if Washington birthday becomes a different holiday and then,
deal with it when it happens.
Yeah, but I think that there's something to be said about, next year we'll probably be looking at Native American Heritage Day.
I doubt it will be next year. I doubt it will be in our lifetimes. So why don't we deal with what's in front of us? And employees have a certain expectation that Christmas Eve is a day off, and the day after Thanksgiving is a day off. For us to change it at this point, I think, is disruptive beyond need.
Councilmember Bear, you had a question.
I just wanted to weigh in that I know it's not it doesn't really relate as much to the banking industry, but at our company we have 6 paid holidays, and I'm hesitant to start to get too far away from what the private sector is doing in terms of holidays. So my preference would be that we keep the city holidays at a total of 12, one more than federal, but at a total of 12. And what days those are, I would leave that up to somebody else to figure out, but I do agree with what Councilmember Gaynor is saying. I think he makes a good point in that instead of having more personal holidays floating around, it helps out the city a little bit to have a set holiday where everybody takes that off, because then we don't have to arrange schedules to try to cover those days.
All right, so we landed on swapping in, I hate to say what we're swapping, but adding Juneteenth as a National Independence Day, on June 20th and taking Good Friday, which I know a lot of our employees enjoy that time.
But, I mean, they still have a floating day that they can take it off.
Or vacation day.
Or
That
vacation
will
day.
be a day when City Hall will now be open, if council so chose, right? So I do believe, and Josh, I'm in the banking industry, I get 10 holidays off, so.
Man,
Man, the banking industry has changed so much.
I'm envious, very nice.
So what are we doing?
Was that in the form of a motion?
No, I'll make a motion to, I'd like to make a motion to adopt Juneteenth as the Juneteenth National Independence Day as a city holiday, and remove Good Friday as a city holiday, maintaining a total holidays 13.
No, 12.
12? No, that's, okay, let me start over. Because no, if we just swap out Juneteenth and then add a personal day, okay. So, I'd like to make a motion to adopt our holiday calendar, removing Good Friday, adding Juneteenth, and a personal optional date for the employees.
So we're not adding a second personal date, we're just keeping the one.
No, we're adding the.
No, we're adding a 1, so the total will be 13.
So we're making it 13.
Yeah.
I just want to make it clear what we're voting on here, so I can
Well,
understand it.
it's 12 now, they will be, there's notice, it needs to be second so we can talk about it.
Come first. Okay.
Any, do we have a second for
Second.
further discussion?
Okay.
Oh, for further discussion, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's
You
right.
have to have a second in order to have further.
So we can discuss my motion. My motion is to add a personal holiday and make Juneteenth a holiday, but switch it for Good Friday, which will be a net 0 to 12, and then add an additional holiday, which will get up to 13, which is what the proposal is.
Right.
Okay, are we clear?
I thought we were going to 12, but I guess not, okay.
So
So
it
if we
sounds-
just adopted Juneteenth, if that's all we did today, it'd be 13.
Right.
That's all we did.
No, if we just adopted and reduced Good Friday and didn't add the
No, no,
personal
no.
day.
It's currently at 12. If we just added Juneteenth, it would go to 13.
Right.
That's literally all we did.
Yep. And your proposal is that we would drop
Drop,
Good Friday and essentially
add
make
Juneteenth, and then
Good
add
Friday
a
a
personal day. That was my
personal day.
motion.
As this impacts staff,
I have to say, without having old staff, I don't know that we can represent preferences on days. I would suspect that a personal holiday is very popular among staff because of the fact that they have great flexibility as long as everybody doesn't take the same personal holiday. The chief is at the back of the room. He's got a third of your staff. So, Chief, I don't know if you have a comment on that, but I assume
We just adopted now, we just had Juneteenth.
About this.
Yeah.
If we don't get holidays, so they work them all, and as Councilmember Hickson mentioned, there, you do get some extra pay, but the flexible holiday or personal holiday or whatever you want to call it is, it's really a good thing. It really is. It's really a good thing for them to be able to just have a day that not everybody else has, and working every other Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. It's just kind of nice to be able to take that. So I like that idea, and I think they would too, of the personal holiday.
Okay. All right, we have a motion on the floor. We've had discussion. Are there any additional questions?
I do have an additional question. Is this time sensitive that it has to be voted on today?
Not necessarily, except for the fact that we normally adopt your calendar of holidays so that going into the new year, employees can start scheduling leave.
Right.
So there's value in doing it. If you came back a month from now, you would still adopt the holiday schedule before we had the first holiday in 2022, because this year, New Year's Eve is in December. And sometimes it's actually in January. Or New Year's Day is celebrated the 31st, not the 1st.
Oh, because of the
it's
Saturday. Yeah, okay.
So-
Same thing with Christmas. Yeah, okay.
So as long as you do it before, but.
When it's
the earlier you-
observed.
The earlier you decide, the earlier employees are able to start figuring out when they're going to schedule vacations, whether it's a holiday or a personal day or a personal holiday.
I have a question, Mr. Mayor. Can we knock this out now? I like action, please.
Well,
There's a motion on the table.
yeah, we do have a motion and second on the table. Any additional questions? Having heard none, all in favor, let you know by raise your right hand saying aye.
Aye.
Opposes, same sign. Motion passes. Is that an abstent? Did you vote for?
No, abstain.
One abstention.
Yeah,
Yes. Oh,
Abstain?
can't abstain unless you have a conflict. I mean, you can't abstain. No one can tell you what to vote.
okay.
Traditionally.
Okay.
Have to look at the charter.
Yes.
So as Matthew comes up, at your last meeting, you asked us to, there's no item for you to vote on tonight, but you did ask if we had additional information to bring up to speed. And coincidentally, today, we received additional information from Peck and Wood, which has been working on behalf of our city engineer, Matthew Zackian. So ask Matthew to give you an update on what we're planning.
Before you proceed, like I said, I'm a little slow tonight, and in reaction, I'd like to revisit the previous vote so that we can have clarification. We had three support,
One no, and one abstention.
and you have a conflict.
No, so I would vote no.
Okay, all right. Vote. Okay, two, no. Okay, very good. Thank you all for bearing with me on that. It's
No problem.
coming back slowly. All right. Now let's move to item 7, bridge at Valley and Cochran.
So we had Keck Wood, who's the consultant on the, working on this connection. They provided a plan and profile to just kind of let us know exactly what's going on and what we're looking at. The plan is what we're looking at. It starts at Valley Road with a 6-foot connection. It goes parallel to the driveway off of Valley Road.
You can see what he's referring to.
Oh, yeah. So it kind of goes north, kind of in a northwestern manner along, right next to the driveway. And then it cuts across that existing ditch, and it wraps around a cul-de-sac. Fortunately, once it crosses the ditch, all the work is proposed within the right-of-way. It's a 6-foot sidewalk with a little boardwalk between, just crossing over the ditch. The connection that's shown, the segment right next to the driveway is about a 13%, and it just runs parallel to the driveway, and it's the same grade. Once it cuts across, we have a couple of 30-foot landings, 30-foot segments with a couple landings to provide us an ADA transition type sidewalk. I know that there are, the next sheet shows the profile. And the lower end is actually the Valley Road, and you can actually tell that it is just a 2% where it just tapers into the existing road. And then the 13% is your grade at the driveway, so it matches with the grade of the driveway over there, and then it goes over, and then it crosses that ditch. A little bit of the dip is where the ditch is, and then it goes over for a couple of extra runs, which are about 30 feet, with a couple of extra landings. We noticed a couple of things that needed to be changed or needed to be addressed. The first one is the connection right of the Valley Road. There was a fire hydrant that was not taken into account, so most likely it's going to be rerouted again towards around the fire hydrant and connect into Valley Road further down south of the fire hydrant. There was the other concern that I had too was actually where they're crossing that ditch. We want to make sure that they're not compromising the runoff that's actually flows into that ditch. So they're reworking that area, see if we can actually extend that 13% a little bit further up and then hit the top of the that embankment and just cross the ditch. Those were the two concerns that I had that they're actually looking into and working on right now. The dotted line on that side view? Yeah. What is that? That's the existing surface, the existing ground, so.
So you have to dig out?
You're gonna have to dig out, and that's something that they're also looking into. They're cutting cross sections. They just wanted to make sure that we finalize the alignment before they cut cross sections to let us know exactly what's going on there.
And the part that you're digging out is in the right of way?
It is in the right of way.
Okay.
Yes. And if you go back, yeah.
We have another question.
Sure.
So,
Member Bear.
so this is going to be sunk down lower than the road,
Yes,
and that's why you're running it clear up to here.
yes.
And what's going to keep people from just taking a shortcut?
Well, that's,
That was my question earlier today, yes.
It'll be a rail.
so that's another connection because of the abrupt changes in the alignment itself. We're proposing and maybe looking into that extra connection to provide it for for bicycles. They're still working on it too. Again, this was another thing that we're getting them to look at. There's got to be the curb ramp that needs to go in and then slope down. So based on the profile that was provided, we're trying to figure out what the grade is going to be at that point, especially because they're digging into it, so.
So I wasn't clear when I was looking at this.
Sure.
The yellow and the red are both
So yellow,
connections to the road.
yeah, so the yellow is what was proposed by Ketwood. The red was Mr. Johnson and myself were discussing today.
We looked at this and realized some people don't follow the lines, and so when they come across the bridge, if they're coming up from Valley, that some people won't bother to use a 6-foot sidewalk that has a nice gradual slope meeting ADA requirements. They'll just cross over to get to the road. So I think the key, what I would say, I appreciate Matthew working with Kicking Wood on this, everything in the part that they propose is ADA compliant with the exception of where you have a 6-foot sidewalk paralleling the driveway. That's a 13 degree grade versus 8 1/4, which is ADA. But people have been going up that driveway for a very long time and will match what they've historically done, and we believe that history of that element probably obviates, to use a fancy word, our compliance with, and I'm not an attorney, our compliance with ADA requirements. But everything else is intended to have a more gradual slope. But that part that shows proposed connection was simply Matthew and I talking about the fact that some people are just going to cut off the trail, and I mean, today if you've been out there, they've already carved the trail from Valley to Cochran, and they're climbing up the hill. I've done it myself twice, but so that proposed connection just takes into consideration some people don't need an ADA compliant trail, and they'll just do the shortest connection, and we might as well pave it for them. So are we certain that a trail must comply with ADA?
So a trail, it doesn't have to comply with an ADA. And I just wanted to make sure that I make a correction regarding a statement that I said in the policy work session. I was referring to the ADA transition plan, which says under the pedestrian facilities and public right-of-way improvement schedule that the City of Norcross has set a schedule for improving the accessibility of its pedestrian facilities and that after 10 years, 100% of accessibility features that was constructed after January 26, 1991 will be ADA compliant. That only applied to the pedestrian facilities that were evaluated as part of the 2016 transition plan. So I just wanted to make sure that I corrected
So
that statement that I made.
existing trails that are now in place that would be greater than an 8.5 degree pitch wouldn't officially comply with ADA, yet there are trails like that that have been constructed within the last 5 years. So I'm trying to say, you know, if this is a trail, it's always been used this way. It's basically been used the way the red line is drawn. It seems like if we don't have to comply, because it's a trail, maybe we're designating it that way and
that is correct. The fact that there are some trails that do not meet the ADA requirement is just because of the limitations within the challenges in the topography, other challenges that actually force a certain alignment and force a certain trail that does not have to meet the ADA requirement. Of course, if it falls under federally funded type projects, then that's a different ballgame. But if there are constraints with site topography, natural features, then it does not need to meet the ADA transition, the ADA compliance.
I wouldn't mind taking a different tact on this. We know we want to do something here. We know we eventually will need to do something here. Why don't we have staff engage? Well, we might want to take this into exec. Yeah, I wouldn't mind moving this to executive session and tabling this, Mr. Mayor, until our January policy work session.
December policy, you mean?
December. Whatever our next one is. Okay. Maybe I do have COVID fog.
I'll second that motion for a table if that's what it was.
It wasn't a motion yet unless...
No, I'll make a motion to table this.
Okay, we have a motion to table this issue until...
December policy work session.
December policy. All in favor, let it be known by raising your right hand saying aye.
Aye.
Opposes? Same sign. One opposed.
just for clarification, this was to put the engineering together. This wasn't actually to build something.
Yep, that's cost us money, and there might be some other options.
Mr. Mayor, the city clerk might need clarification of that last vote.
I'm sorry?
Can you clarify the vote?
Clarify the vote. We had three. Raise your hands again.
There were four takers.
Four for support and one opposed. Okay. All right, let's move to number 9, acceptance bid for sale of West Peachtree Street.
Good evening, everyone. Before I get started, I wanted to mention that my colleagues from the city's attorney office as well as community development and planning are with me this evening to help address any follow-up questions or clarification that you all might need on this agenda item. But in short, this is for the acceptance of the bid for the sale of city-owned property on West Peachtree Street. And the recommendation is to accept the highest responsible bid for the sale of this property on West Peachtree Street. Property background, as you can see, 1.73 acre parcel on the corner of West Peachtree Street and Hunter Street in the downtown historic area. Mayor and Council did issue an invitation for sealed bids on the 7th of September. The city subsequently received 4 bids, and after review by the city attorney as well as the community and development and planning department, the highest responsible bid was in the amount of $700,000 by Billionaires Funding Group LLC. You'll see there's a list of each bidder on the chart below. If you turn the page over, details the financial impact, which is approximately $700,000. And you have the information in your packet for the actual bid as well as all of the proposals. So I will.
Thank you for that presentation. Council, do we have any questions or discussion at this
We have a
time?
discussion. City manager, what would, or Eric, what would we need to do to take, where would the proceeds, first question would be, where would the proceeds for the $700,000 typically go?
So typically, the general fund, you have a line item for sale of property. So right now, we haven't budgeted, I don't think, of any of that. I think year-to-date, we've received maybe $40,000, if I'm remembering correctly. But it would normally go to the general fund. You have the opportunity to commit or designate funds for a specific purpose, and that can still remain in the general fund. But if mayor or council, you could do it tonight, you could do it in the future, do a resolution, probably with a little bit of notice would be better to do that. But you could, first of all, we have to get the closing on this. We don't have assurance today that we don't just get 5% earnest money on this, and it goes south on us. So what you might want to do is consider the designation, and then assuming that we actually get to the finish line, give formal direction for us to track that. And at that point, that designation will be recorded. It will be tracked by auditors until such time as it's eligible use. So.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, perfectly, and if there's no other questions, I'd like to make a motion.
We're sitting on 40 already, so it's true cost, the true price is 740. So we did pretty good.
Oh, the 40 is not part of the 700?
We took it off of prior.
Oh, that was from the previous? Okay, all right.
But the original purchase was, monies were moved from contingency to purchase it originally.
Yes. It was the 40 was a real estate take on some other property, but it's the line item that we're talking about.
Okay, do we have a motion on the floor?
I'd like to make a motion. Council, I'd like to make a motion to approve the bid, the highest responsible bid of $700,000 for Billionaires Funding Group, LLC, with the proceeds to be designated for economic development in the city of Norcross.
We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and seconded. Are there any other questions? Having heard none, all in favor, be known by raising your right hand, saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, we'll move to item 10, which is the reinstatement of Norcross, Georgia Municipal Association Defined Contribution Plan.
So, Mayor and Council, this is an existing plan, so this is a restatement of what has been in place to incorporate required language change to meet IRS requirements.
Okay. Any questions on this issue?
No,
Any
sir.
additional questions? The chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the terms of the adoption agreement and any addendum restatement of the current GMA 401A defined contribution plan.
I'll second it.
A motion by Councilmember Bear, seconded by Councilmember Myers. Any objection to moving the question? Having heard none, all in favor, let it be known by raising your right hand, saying aye.
Aye.
Opposes, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, that was the last agenda item.
Mr. Mayor, did you want to have administratively discuss the tax sale that was discussed earlier? You don't have to.
No.
We don't have to. Okay. Well, I've told you my intent, so we will cancel it tomorrow morning, and
Right.
we try to work with those two parties to fix it.
That does fall under your purview.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'd like to have a quick executive session as well.
Motion to go into exec
For real estate.
For real estate.
Second.
Motion and second to go into exec for real estate. Any objection to adjourning and going into real estate? Having heard none, all in favor, let it be known by raising your right hand, saying aye.
Aye.
Opposes, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you all for being here and sticking this out with us tonight.
Probably just Eric.
Can we just jump into the
Yeah,
room?
let's just do it in this room. Okay, let's do it upstairs, Mr. Mayor, real quick. I mean, we're talking 5 minutes. All right, I think we did right by the Juneteenth stuff, y'all.
It was close. I think if Bruce would have known where things were heading.
Yeah, I was really on the fence on the federal holidays, Bruce.
I think we should vacation too.
Yeah, and sick days.
Pretty soon, there's nothing will happen.
I think we do need to address how often, how much rolls over. How much rolls over? We're able to roll over at the city too? Oh, yeah. Remember, Rudolph retired with 2 years PTO. Do we have a limit on rollover?
Were you able to roll over holidays in your company?
Vacation, yeah, but not holidays, and you only have X amount that you can roll over.
Let's rock and roll upstairs.
I'm good at the pro tem taking. I got to get on the road. I got to.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I'll call you tomorrow and tell you what we're talking about.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mayor.
Ben.
That's safe, okay?
Thank you. Sure.
Yeah, you guys look like twins. Pat, did you coordinate this? You see this?
Thank you. I'll see you. Thank you. Actually, I have a bunch of ties.
Why doesn't